If you are listening to this message, I want you to understand something with absolute clarity. Before we ever speak of discipline, habits, environment, or persistence, we must confront the first and greatest battlefield you will ever face. That battlefield is not your job, not your bank account, not your circumstances. It is your own mind. The limits you feel in your life, the invisible walls you keep running into, the ceilings you never seem to break are not written in the sky. They are written in your beliefs. They are the mental boundaries that quietly shape your choices, your effort, and ultimately your destiny. You see, from the day you were born, the world began drawing lines in your mind. Some of those lines came from family. Some came from teachers, culture, failures, and painful moments you barely remember. Little by little, these lines turned into rules. Rules about what is realistic for you, what is possible for you, what kind of money people like you can make, what kind of relationships you deserve, what level of peace, power, and joy you are allowed to experience. None of these rules were carved into stone by nature. Yet, over time, they began to feel absolute. You stopped questioning them. You simply lived inside them. It is as if you were born with wings, but raised in a room with a low ceiling. After years of bumping your head, you no longer believe you can fly. You do not question the ceiling. You question your wings. That is the tragedy of mental boundaries. They do not just limit what you do. They begin to define who you think you are. I want you to see how subtle this is. You tell yourself, I am just not that type of person. I am not disciplined. I am not confident. I am not good with money. I am not a leader. You repeat these phrases until they sound like facts, but they are not facts. They are stories. Stories you accepted, sometimes without ever consciously choosing them. And every story you accept becomes a brick in the invisible wall that surrounds your future. Imagine for a moment a man with incredible potential. He is intelligent, capable, gifted with ideas that could change his life and impact many others. But deep inside, he carries a quiet belief that people like him never really win. Perhaps he grew up hearing that success belongs to the lucky, to the connected, to those born in the right family or with the right background. So each time he approaches the edge of a breakthrough, an invisible hand pulls him back. Not a physical hand, but the hand of his own belief. He procrastinates on the application. He delays the phone call. He waters down his ideas before anyone else can criticize them. And at the end of the year, he tells himself, maybe it just was not meant to be. What actually happened is much simpler. His mental boundaries refused to allow him to cross into a higher level of life. He was not blocked by the world. He was blocked by his own map of the world. The first step in pushing yourself until everything is possible is to recognize that you are living inside a mental map. That map includes what you believe about effort, pain, failure, success, money, relationships, time, and even about yourself. Some of the roads on that map end in walls that you treat as permanent. I want you to understand that every line on that map can be redrawn. The brain is not a fixed machine. It is a living, changing instrument that responds to repetition, emotion, and decision. The boundaries that feel so solid today were once flexible. They became rigid only because you stopped pushing against them. Think about the way a child approaches the world. A child does not start life with a sense of what is realistic. A child reaches, falls, stands, and tries again. The boundaries of what is possible are wide open. Only over time, with repeated messages of what is allowed and what is not, what is safe and what is not, what is expected and what is not, do those boundaries begin to close in. Many adults are simply children who stopped testing the walls. They accepted the first version of themselves they met, instead of pushing to discover who they could become. If you want to redraw the limits of your life, you must become a student of your own thinking. You must observe your inner language the way a scientist studies an experiment. When you consider a new challenge, what is the first response that rises in your mind? Do Do you hear a voice that says, perhaps this is possible? Let us find out. Or do you hear, who do you think you are? People like you do not do things like this. You will embarrass yourself. You will fail. That voice is not truth. It is habit. It is the echo of your history. It is the sound of your current mental boundaries defending themselves. Those boundaries are not evil. They were formed to protect you from pain, from risk, from the discomfort of uncertainty. But what once protected you is now suffocating you. The same walls that kept you safe as a child are now keeping you small as an adult. To break these limits, you must be willing to feel the discomfort they were designed to help you avoid. You must be willing to feel fear without obeying it, to feel doubt without bowing to it, to feel insecurity without surrendering your potential to it. Right now, your nervous system is trained to treat certain actions as dangerous. Speaking up in a meeting, launching a business, moving to a new environment, demanding more of yourself physically, emotionally, or financially. Your body responds as if these actions were threats. Your heart races, your stomach tightens, your mind produces worst-case scenarios with incredible creativity. Understand what is happening. Your mental boundaries are trying to keep you inside the old version of yourself because that version is familiar. The mind loves the familiar more than it loves the extraordinary. It will choose predictable limitation over uncertain expansion if you let it. That is why you must take command. You must become the conscious architect of your thoughts, not a passive tenant. One powerful way to begin is by asking better questions. Most people, when faced with a challenge, ask, what if I fail? What if it does not work? What if people laugh? Those questions reinforce the boundary. A different person asks, what if I succeed? What if this is the decision that changes everything? What if I am more capable than I have ever allowed myself to believe? These questions reshape the edges of your possibilities. They do not erase risk, but they change your relationship with it. You begin to see challenge not as a threat to your identity, but as the gym in which your identity is strengthened. Remember, every belief you hold today has evidence behind it. You can point to times you failed, times you were rejected, times you did not follow through. If you focus only on those memories, you will build a case against yourself, and that case will become a prison. But there is also another side to your story. Times you overcame difficulty, times you showed courage, times you learned quickly, times you surprised even yourself. You must gather that evidence intentionally. Review it. Write it down. Let it speak back to you. You will begin to realize that your current mental boundaries are not built on the whole truth. They are built on a selective memory of your worst moments. You are more than your worst moments. You are more than your past failures. The question is whether you will allow that truth to guide you into new action. Let us go deeper. Mental boundaries are not only about what you think you can do, they are also about what you think you deserve. There are men and women with incredible work ethic who unconsciously believe they are unworthy of peace, joy, or abundance. So when good things begin to happen, they sabotage them. They argue with success in their own mind. They say, this is too much. This is too good for me. This cannot last. And because the mind always seeks to make reality match belief, they begin to make choices that bring them back down to the level they secretly feel they deserve. This is why pushing yourself is not only about harder work, it is about higher self-worth. If you do not believe you deserve a bigger life, you will never allow yourself to sustain it. Even if you manage to reach a higher level of achievement for a moment, you will find a way to give it back. You will return to the old boundaries because they feel safe. So I ask you now, what do you truly believe you deserve? Not what do you wish to believe, but what do your actions reveal? What do you accept from others? How do you allow yourself to be spoken to? How do you treat your own body? How do you handle your finances? How do you speak to yourself in failure? These patterns are mirrors reflecting your standard. If the reflection is small, it is not because your potential is small, it is because your mental frame is small. You must widen it. How? By deliberately raising the minimum you are willing to accept from your life and from yourself, and then aligning your behavior with that new standard. This is where the next sections of our journey will lead, into the territory of standards, discipline, and identity. But before we go there, you must see that every standard you raise begins in the mind. You will never enforce a higher standard consistently until you have first accepted mentally that it is now your normal. Imagine a thermostat on the wall. It is set to a certain temperature. If the room gets colder than that setting, the heat turns on. If it gets hotter, the air conditioning activates. The goal is always to bring the room back to the set point. Your mental boundaries are like that thermostat. You have a set point for success, for effort, for money, for love, for health. When life falls below that level, you feel discomfort and push to improve. But when life rises above it, you also feel discomfort and unconsciously pull yourself back down. The key to pushing yourself until everything is possible is to reset that inner thermostat. You must decide that the level you once called extraordinary will now become your starting point. That the effort you once considered intense will soon be your baseline. That the vision you once thought was a fantasy will now be treated as a responsibility. This mental reset does not happen by magic. It happens through repetition and decision. Every time you act beyond your old boundary, you send a new signal to your mind. You say, "This is who I am now." Every time you refuse to shrink back when fear rises, you carve a new groove in your brain. Over time, these new grooves become the default path for your thoughts. The boundary moves. What was once terrifying becomes normal. What was once impossible becomes expected. You know this is true because you have already experienced it in small ways. There was a time when tasks you now do effortlessly seem difficult. Perhaps driving a car, speaking a new language, handling a certain amount of responsibility at work. At first, your mind resisted. It questioned your ability. Over time, through repetition, those tasks became natural. The mental boundary shifted. The same principle can be applied to every area of your life. If you are willing to sustain the push long enough for the boundary to break, at this point you may say, "This is all very inspiring, but how do I actually begin?" Start with awareness. Spend the next days listening to your automatic thoughts. Notice the moment you think, "I cannot," "I always," "I never," "That is just how I am." Those phrases are signposts marking the edge of your current mental territory. Do not argue with them emotionally. Simply write them down. Observe them. Then ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it truly mine, or did I inherit it? Is it absolutely true, or has it simply never been challenged? Then, take one small action that contradicts the belief. If the belief says, "I am not a disciplined person," choose one task and complete it every day this week, no matter how you feel. If the belief says, "I am not confident," practice speaking one clear sentence of your opinion in a situation where you would normally stay silent. If the belief says, "I am not good with money," spend 30 minutes each day learning and tracking your finances. These are not random tasks. They are blows against the wall. With each blow, the structure weakens. With each act of defiance, you are telling your subconscious, the old map is being replaced. The boundaries are moving. As you do this work, understand that your emotions will not always cooperate. There will be days when you feel foolish, unqualified, out of place. That is not a sign you are on the wrong path. It is a sign you have stepped beyond your old mental border. New territory always feels unfamiliar. The discomfort you feel is proof you are growing. You are no longer living within the comfortable lies of your limitations. You are confronting them. And as you confront them, something powerful begins to occur. You start to experience small wins. The call you feared ends with progress. The challenge you avoided becomes a lesson you are proud of. The habit you doubted you could sustain becomes a streak you refuse to break. Each victory, however small, sends a new message to your mind. It says, Perhaps I was wrong about myself. Perhaps I am stronger than I believed. Perhaps I can handle more than I thought. This is how the mental boundaries that shape your life begin to loosen their grip. Not through one dramatic moment of inspiration, but through repeated experiences that contradict the old story. Over time, the story changes. You no longer see yourself as a victim of circumstances, but as the architect of them. You no longer see challenge as a punishment, but as the material from which your strength is built. You no longer see limits as fixed, but as suggestions you are free to ignore. When that shift occurs, pushing yourself is no longer a burden. It becomes a way of honoring who you truly are. The man or woman who lives beneath their potential suffers in a very specific way. There is a quiet ache, a sense of restlessness, a feeling that something more is possible but remains unexplored. That ache is the voice of your true self calling you beyond your current mental boundaries. It is not there to torment you. It is there to guide you. The question is whether you will answer. As we move deeper into this message, into the next section, on raising your standards and rewriting your identity, I want you to carry this truth with you. Nothing in your external world will change for long unless the internal boundaries change first. You can force a burst of effort for a week, a month, maybe even a year. But unless you expand the mental frame of who you are and what is possible for you, you will always return to the old level. If you truly wish to push yourself until everything is possible, you must commit to this inner work with the same seriousness you would bring to any great mission. Study your thoughts, challenge your assumptions, raise your internal set point, then build habits, standards and structures that match that new inner reality. The mental boundaries that once shaped your life do not have to shape your future. You can redraw them. You can expand them. You can step beyond them and never return. That is the beginning of real power. That is the first step in a life where possibility no longer feels distant, but becomes the natural expression of who you have chosen to become. If you truly wish to push yourself until everything is possible, you must do more than stretch your effort. You must rewrite the rules you live by. You must raise your standards, and you must rewrite your identity. Until you do that, every burst of motivation will be temporary. You will sprint for a short distance and then quietly drift back to the old level of life that your standards allow. The world you are living in today is nothing more or less than a reflection of what you have decided to tolerate. Your income is a reflection of what you have decided to tolerate. Your health, your relationships, your daily energy, your sense of peace, your level of focus and discipline, all of it is a mirror of your standards. If you accept lateness from yourself, you will live a life that is always behind. If you accept excuses from yourself, you will live a life that is always short of its potential. If you accept mental laziness, you will live a life where possibility is always talked about but never seized. Nothing changes until the standard changes. And the standard is always set inside, never outside. Most men spend their lives explaining their results instead of examining their standards. They say the economy is difficult. My family did not support me. I did not get the right opportunities. And some of these explanations may contain elements of truth, but they are not the whole truth. The deeper truth is this: somewhere beneath the surface, a standard was set that said, this is enough effort. This is an acceptable level of discipline. This is as far as I go. This is the amount of discomfort I am willing to endure. Once that standard is reached, the inner thermostat switches off the heat. You stop. You justify. You protect the old identity. If you want to make everything possible, you must attack that point directly. You must raise the bar until the man you are today feels like a stranger to the man you will become. Raising your standards is not a slogan. It is a deliberate, often painful act of transformation. It begins with ruthless honesty. You must look at your life as it is and ask, where have I been lying to myself? Where have I been calling comfort self-care? Where have I been calling procrastination patience? Where have I been calling fear wisdom? Every place where your results fall short of your potential is a place where your standards are too low. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You realize that the distance between you and your next level is not filled with miracles. It is filled with decisions about what you will no longer accept. But understand this clearly. You cannot raise your standards for long while keeping the same identity. If you see yourself as a man who always gives up, eventually you will. If you see yourself as someone who never finishes, eventually you will prove yourself right. If you see yourself as a victim of circumstances, you will continue to gather evidence that life is unfair. Identity is the governor on your effort. It is the ceiling on your consistency. It is the quiet voice that says, "This is who we are. This is how we operate." And anything above that level feels uncomfortable. So when you talk about raising your standards, what you are really talking about is rewriting that voice. You are talking about building a new self-image that demands more, expects more, and refuses to step back into the old costume of your former self. Your identity is built in three ways: through the stories you tell yourself, through the standards you enforce, and through the evidence you gather from your own behavior. For years, you have been telling yourself stories. Stories about what you can and cannot do, what is for people like you and what is not, what level of life is reachable and what is reserved for others. These stories have shaped your self-image. Then, through your standards, you have been enforcing that image. You have allowed certain things from yourself and refused others, always in line with how you see yourself. And finally, your behavior has produced results that seem to confirm the story. You fail and say, "Of course, that is just my luck." You give up and say, "That is just who I am." You procrastinate and say, "I have always been like this." Step back and you will see the trap. Identity creates standards. Standards create behavior. Behavior creates evidence. Evidence reinforces identity. The cycle closes, and your life becomes a loop, repeating itself year after year, under different circumstances, but with the same results. To push yourself until everything is possible, you must break this loop. You must interrupt the cycle and install a different pattern. That begins with a decision about who you are going to be from this moment forward. Not in vague terms, but in precise declarations. You must say to yourself, "I am the kind of person who finishes what he starts. I am the kind of person who keeps his word even when it is difficult. I am the kind of person who shows up on time, who trains his mind and body, who treats his mission like a sacred responsibility." These are not empty affirmations. They are identity statements, but they only matter if you are willing to back them with action. A new identity is not built by saying new words. It is built by living new standards. In the beginning, these standards will feel unnatural because they are not yet your habit. Waking up earlier will feel wrong to the identity that has accepted sleeping late. Saying no to distraction will feel harsh to the identity that has always said yes to ease. Sitting down to do deep work will feel heavy to the identity that has grown comfortable with shallow effort. I think this is the exact moment where most people retreat. They say, "This does not feel like me," as if that were a reason to stop. But of course, it does not feel like you. That is the point. You are not trying to confirm who you have been. You are training yourself into who you intend to become. Think of it like this. There is a future version of you who already lives at the level you desire. That man has higher standards. He thinks differently, speaks differently, chooses differently. When faced with challenge, he reacts with calm focus, not panic. When given an excuse, he rejects it. When offered an easy way out, he refuses. If you are honest, you can almost see him. He exists in your imagination. The task before you now is to bring that man from imagination into reality by aligning your present actions with his standards. You can ask a simple question throughout your day. What would that version of me do right now? Not what do I feel like doing? Not what is easiest to do? But what would the man I am becoming choose in this exact moment? This question is a bridge between identities If you answer it honestly and act accordingly, you will begin to live as the future version of yourself before the external rewards arrive. You will carry yourself differently, speak differently, plan differently. At first, the world will not notice. The bank account may not change. The scale may not move. The results may lag behind. That is where faith in your new identity is tested. Will you hold the higher standard when the evidence is not yet visible? Will you keep your promise to yourself when no one is clapping? Will you live by your code even when your old life is still within reach? If you do, something powerful begins to happen. You build self-trust. Every time you set a standard and stick to it, you are sending a message to the deepest part of your mind. You are saying, "My word is law. My decisions are final. My commitments are not negotiable." Over time, that message becomes your internal reality. You stop needing accountability from others because you have become accountable to yourself. You no longer rely on motivation because your identity now demands action. You do not argue with your obligations. You execute them because you have decided that is who you are. This is what it means to rewrite your identity. The old story was, "I am someone who starts and stops." The new story is, "I am someone who finishes." The old story was, "I am inconsistent." The new story is, "I am reliable." The old story was, "I am easily distracted." The new story is, "My focus is a weapon." Your standards are simply the rules that prove which story is true. There is another side to this that you must understand. Raising your standards will cost you. It will cost you your excuses, your comfort, your old habits, and in many cases, your old environment. When you decide that lateness is no longer acceptable, you will part ways with the version of you that always arrived last. When you decide that gossip, negativity, and small thinking are no longer acceptable, you will feel distance between you and those who still live in that space. When you decide that vague goals and lazy effort are no longer acceptable, you will have to confront the areas of your life where you have been pretending. This is not easy. It feels like loss because in many ways it is. You are losing the life you have known. You are losing the identity you have worn like a familiar coat. But understand this, every new level of your life will demand a new you. The old identity cannot cross the bridge with you. It must be left behind. That is the price of expansion. When you raise your standards, you will also begin to see clearly where your current life is out of alignment. You will notice the clutter in your space and recognize it as a reflection of mental clutter. You will notice how you use your time and see how much of it is wasted on activities that do not serve your purpose. You will notice how often you say yes when you mean no, and how often you choose distraction over depth. Do not be discouraged by this awareness. It is a gift. You cannot change what you refuse to see. Raising your standards shines a light into the corners of your life that you have been ignoring. Once the light is there, you have a choice. You can lower the light by lowering your standards, or you can clean the room. Pushing yourself until everything is possible requires that you choose to clean the room. That means setting specific, non-negotiable rules for yourself. For example, you might decide that from this day forward, you will not go to bed without planning the next day. That is a standard. You might decide that you will train your body a certain number of times per week, no matter how you feel. That is a standard. You might decide that you will spend a minimum amount of time every day developing your mind and your skills. That is a standard. You might decide that you will speak to others and to yourself with a certain level of respect and clarity. That is a standard. Each standard becomes a brick in the new identity you are building. The more bricks you lay, the more solid the structure becomes. Over time, these standards become automatic. They form the invisible framework of your life. And that is when people from the outside look at you and say, "You are so disciplined. You are so motivated. You are so focused." They see the behavior. They do not see the internal work of identity and standards that produced it. But you will know that every early morning, every difficult choice, every act of self-control was a vote for the person you decided to become. And you will feel a quiet power growing inside you. The power of alignment. Raising your standards and rewriting your identity is not about pretending to be perfect. It is about refusing to live below what you know is possible for you. You will still make mistakes. You will still have days where you fall short. The difference is that now, your standard will not allow you to stay there. The old identity would use one failure as proof that nothing can change. The new identity uses one failure as information to adjust, refine, and move forward. The old identity would say, "This is just who I am." The new identity says, "This is a moment, not my destiny." When you reach this place, you become dangerous to your old limitations. You can no longer be easily pulled back into the previous version of yourself because your standards have become too high and your identity too strong. You may still feel fear, but you act anyway. You may still feel doubt, but you refuse to surrender. You may still hear the whispers of the old story, but you no longer believe them. You know who you are becoming, and you are willing to pay the price. As we move further into this journey together, into the disciplines of action, persistence, environment, and association, remember that all of those outer elements must be anchored to this inner work. You cannot push your body while your identity remains weak. You cannot build powerful habits while your standards remain low. You cannot endure great trials while still seeing yourself as someone who always breaks. The man who pushes himself until everything is possible is not simply a man who works hard. He is a man who has raised his standards so high and rewritten his identity so completely that living small is no longer an option. His mind rejects it. His standards forbid it. His identity will not allow it. That is the level you are called to. That is the level you can reach if you are willing to do this inner work with seriousness and sincerity. Begin today. Define the standards you will no longer compromise. Declare the identity you are committed to building. Then let every decision, every habit, every hour become evidence that the transformation is already underway. Discipline, habits, and the architecture of daily greatness are where everything you have heard so far becomes real or remains theory. You can talk about pushing yourself. You can dream of breaking limits. You can raise your standards in your mind. But until those decisions are poured into the concrete of your daily routine, nothing in your life will truly change. Your day is the smallest complete unit of your destiny. You do not live your purpose in years. You live it in days. You do not build greatness in grand gestures. You build it in repeated actions structured across each 24-hour period. If you want to push yourself until everything is possible, you must stop thinking of discipline as a mood and begin to see it as the architecture of your life. Imagine for a moment that your future is a building. Most people are obsessed with the top floor, the view, the accolades, the freedom, the visible rewards of success. Very few are obsessed with the blueprint, the foundation, the daily beams and bricks that make that building possible. They want the penthouse, but they dismiss the discipline. They want the title, but they refuse the training. They want the results, but they resist the rhythm required to sustain those results. Discipline is that rhythm. Habits are the bricks. Your schedule is the blueprint. Together, they form the architecture of daily greatness. If you neglect this architecture, your life will remain an unfinished construction site, full of potential but never fully built. Let us be very clear. Discipline is not about punishment. It is not about living a miserable, rigid life with no joy. True discipline is about alignment. It is the act of arranging your time, energy, and attention so that they serve your highest purpose instead of your lowest impulses. It is the decision to become a deliberate architect instead of a passive tenant in your own life. When you resist discipline, what you are really resisting is the responsibility of authorship. You are saying, "I would rather live by default than by design." If you keep living that way, you will wake up one day surrounded by results you never consciously chose. To change this, you must first accept a powerful truth. Your current habits have already built a life for you. The question is not whether you are disciplined. The question is, disciplined toward what? You are already disciplined in checking your phone. Disciplined in delaying the hard task. Disciplined in giving in to distraction. Disciplined in talking yourself out of your own potential. Anything you repeat with regularity is a form of discipline. The work now is to reclaim that power and redirect it toward a higher standard. To consciously design routines that are worthy of the future you say you want. That begins the moment your eyes open each morning. The way you start your day is not a small detail. It is the opening command you give to your mind and body. Most people wake up and immediately surrender their attention to noise. They check messages, scroll mindlessly, react to the world before they have even decided who they are going to be that day. They begin in chaos and then wonder why their life feels chaotic. If you want to push yourself until everything is possible, your mornings can no longer belong to chance. They must belong to vision. A disciplined morning is not about copying someone else's routine. It is about creating a sequence of actions that align you with your purpose before the world has a chance to pull you away. That might mean rising earlier than you are comfortable with. It might mean moving your body when you would rather remain under the covers. It might mean sitting in quiet reflection or journaling when you are tempted to grab your phone. It might mean revisiting your goals, reading something that strengthens your mind, or planning your top priorities for the day. The specific elements can vary, but the principle is fixed. You are telling yourself, I do not begin my day in reaction. I begin it in direction. That decision, repeated morning after morning, slowly rewires your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone dragged by circumstances and begin to feel like a commander of your own time. Discipline in the morning creates clarity. Clarity creates momentum. Momentum makes greatness possible. Once your day has begun, the architecture of daily greatness continues with how you structure your work, your focus, and your choices. Most people drift through the day putting out fires, reacting to whatever appears urgent, rarely distinguishing between what is truly important and what is simply loud. At the end of the day, they are exhausted but strangely unsatisfied, because despite all the motion, they did not move closer to their real mission. Discipline in the middle of your day is the art of saying no to the trivial so you can say yes to the essential. It is the willingness to block time for deep work, to commit to completing specific tasks that advance your purpose, and to protect those blocks with the seriousness of an appointment with your future. This means reducing the constant switching between tasks. When you constantly change what you are doing, you fracture your attention and weaken your ability to produce anything meaningful. Discipline says, for this next block of time, I am fully here. I am not half working and half scrolling. I am not half focused and half distracted. I am present. When you train yourself to work like this, even for shorter periods, your productivity and your confidence climb together. You begin to trust that when you sit down to work, you will actually move forward, not just spin in place. Discipline also shows up in the small decisions that seem insignificant in the moment, but compound over time. It is in the choice to complete the last repetition when you train your body instead of quitting when it starts to burn. It is in the decision to finish the paragraph when your mind wanders instead of immediately indulging the urge to check something else. It is in the quiet refusal to gossip, complain, or speak negatively when that has always been your habit. Each of these moments is a vote for the old you or the new you. Discipline is simply the act of consistently voting for the version of you that you have declared in your heart you must become. Habits are how those votes are counted. One isolated disciplined decision is powerful, but it is not enough to transform your life. Real transformation happens when those decisions are repeated so often that they become automatic and require less willpower. That is what a habit is. It is a decision you no longer have to debate. It is a behavior that has become the default. When you are tired, you fall to the level of your habits, not your intentions. This is why the architecture of daily greatness demands that you design and build habits in advance. You cannot wait until the moment of temptation and expect to choose correctly if you have no structure around you. If you know that your energy and focus are highest in the morning, build a habit of doing your most important work at that time and protect it. If you know that you tend to procrastinate by opening certain apps or visiting certain websites, build habits that create friction. Remove the shortcuts. Log out. Or physically change your environment. Do not rely on willpower alone. Let your habits carry the load. If you know that your mind tends to spiral into negativity at night, create an evening ritual that directs your attention toward gratitude. Review and planning instead of aimless consumption. These are not random tricks. They are bricks in the structure of your day. And over time, they become the skeleton of your character. Understand this. Every habit you install either strengthens your capacity to push yourself or weakens it. A habit of hitting the snooze button weakens it. A habit of finishing what you start strengthens it. A habit of checking your phone every few minutes weakens it. A habit of working without interruptions for a set period strengthens it. A habit of poor food choices that drain your energy weakens it. A habit of nourishing your body to support your mission strengthens it. None of these decisions look dramatic in the moment. But that is the deceptive nature of habits. They are quiet. They are subtle. They do not shout. They whisper your future into existence day after day. Many people will say they want to achieve something extraordinary. But their daily architecture is built for comfort, not greatness. They stay up late for entertainment and then wonder why they wake up tired and unfocused. They scatter their attention across a dozen small tasks and wonder why nothing important gets finished. They let their emotions dictate their actions and wonder why their results are inconsistent. If you want to push yourself until everything is possible, you must be willing to confront this gap between what you say you want and what your day is built to produce. That confrontation is not about guilt. It is about responsibility. It is about looking at your calendar, your routines, your environment, and saying, do these structures support the man I am becoming, or do they support the man I am trying to leave behind? Discipline is the courage to redesign those structures, even when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient. One of the most powerful ways to do this is to define a few non-negotiable habits that you will perform regardless of how you feel. Not 20, not 30, but a handful of core actions that are so aligned with your purpose that skipping them is no longer an option. These become the pillars of your day. For example, you might decide that every day, no matter what, you will move your body, you will invest time in your mind, and you will make measurable progress on one important task related to your mission. That is not complicated, but if you actually live it, your life will begin to change. These non-negotiables must be specific. Move my body could mean a set amount of time or a particular routine. Invest in my mind could mean reading a certain number of pages, studying a particular subject, or writing reflections. Make progress on my mission could mean a concrete action such as creating, building, contacting, practicing, or solving. When you define these clearly and track them daily, you turn your day into a training ground. Each completed non-negotiable is another brick laid in the architecture of daily greatness. Do not underestimate the power of this. When you string enough of these days together, something profound happens. You begin to feel a deep internal shift. You stop needing motivational speeches to get started because your discipline is now part of your identity. You look back over weeks and months and see evidence that you can rely on yourself. That reliability becomes a source of quiet pride and power. You are no longer just dreaming about pushing yourself. You are living it every day in tangible, measurable ways. Discipline also requires that you respect recovery as much as effort. A well-designed building is not under construction 24 hours a day. There are phases of building and phases of inspection. Phases of work and phases of rest. Many driven people misunderstand this. They think pushing themselves means grinding without pause, burning themselves out in the name of ambition. That is not greatness. That is sabotage. Overwork without rhythm eventually erodes your clarity. your creativity, and your health. And a life built on that foundation will crack under pressure. True discipline includes the maturity to schedule rest, reflection, and renewal as deliberately as you schedule work. It means stepping away from your tasks not to escape, but to return stronger and more focused. It means honoring sleep, nourishing relationships that uplift you, and creating moments of stillness where you can listen to your own thoughts without noise. In those moments of quiet, your mind integrates what you have been doing. New insights emerge. Your vision sharpens. Your resolve deepens. Without these pauses, you are merely surviving your schedule instead of using it to rise. Let us tie this back to the larger message of pushing yourself until everything is possible. Without discipline, your desire to push will remain scattered. You will push hard for a few days, perhaps even a few weeks. But without habits and structure, that push will fade the moment life becomes inconvenient. You will believe you lack motivation when in truth you lack architecture. With discipline, your push becomes sustainable. Your habits carry you through the days when you do not feel inspired. Your routines protect you from the chaos of circumstances. Your non-negotiables keep you tethered to your purpose, even when your emotions fluctuate. You become like a well-designed building in a storm. The wind may blow, the rain may fall, but the structure holds because the foundation is solid and the design is intentional. As you keep living this way, you will notice that what once felt like a massive stretch becomes normal. Waking early used to be a challenge. Now it is simply what you do. Focusing for a concentrated block of time used to feel impossible. Now it is part of your rhythm. Saying no to distractions used to feel like a sacrifice. Now it feels like self-respect. This is how you push your limits, not by one heroic act, but by daily disciplines that gradually expand what is natural for you. The man who could barely control his mornings becomes the man who commands his entire day. The man who once needed constant external pressure becomes the man who drives himself. The man who once lived in reaction becomes the architect of his own reality. That is the purpose of this section. Not to glorify work for its own sake, but to show you that the path from where you are to where you could be is paved in ordinary hours, structured in extraordinary ways. The greatness you seek is hiding inside your daily choices. When you understand that discipline stops feeling like a burden, it begins to feel like a privilege. The privilege of consciously building a life that reflects your highest standards instead of your lowest habits. As we move from here into the deeper battles of emotion, resistance, and adversity, remember that everything you face will be filtered through the structure you have built into your days. A disciplined life does not remove difficulty, but it gives you the strength, clarity, and stamina to face that difficulty head-on. When your habits are aligned, when your routines are intentional, when your day is constructed in service of your purpose, then pushing yourself until everything is possible is no longer an abstract idea. It becomes the reality you step into each morning and reinforce with every disciplined act, until the architecture of daily greatness supports a future greater than anything you once thought possible. Before we continue, I want to speak directly to those of you who feel something shifting inside as you listen. If this message is awakening strength in you, if it is helping you reclaim control over your mind and your future, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, not as a favor, but as a commitment to yourself. This place is built for people who refuse to settle, who want to master their thinking, their habits, their discipline, and their destiny. If you want guidance, depth, and teachings that sharpen the mind week after week, go ahead and subscribe now. Let us continue. Pain, resistance, and endurance are not the enemies of your progress. They are the gatekeepers of the life you say you want. Up to this point, we have spoken about mental boundaries, raised standards, and the daily architecture of discipline. All of these are vital. But there comes a point when the conversation can no longer remain theoretical. There comes a point where the plan meets the pressure, where the routine collides with reality, where your new identity is tested against old habits and old fears. That point has a name. It is pain. It is resistance. It is the moment when your mind and body begin to argue against the very future you have declared. If you do not understand this moment, if you misinterpret it, you will retreat at the very threshold of transformation. You will tell yourself that something is wrong, that perhaps the dream is too big, that perhaps life is asking too much, when in truth life is finally asking you to grow. Pain is not merely the sensation of discomfort in your muscles or your mind. It is the feeling of your old self dying so that a new self can be born. Resistance is not just procrastination or distraction. It is the defense mechanism of your former identity fighting to stay alive. When you decide to push yourself until everything is possible, you are declaring war on the limitations that have quietly ruled your life for years. Do you imagine they will surrender politely the moment you change your patterns? They will rise. Old habits will shout. Old doubts will whisper. Old fears will present their most convincing arguments. This is why so many begin to push, but so few endure. They feel the pressure and mistake it for a sign they should stop, when in truth it is evidence that the breakthrough is near. To master the art of endurance, you must begin by understanding that pain has a purpose. Not all pain, not the pain of abuse or neglect, but the pain that comes from growth, from stretching, from challenging the old structure of your life. Think of the first time you return to physical training after a long period of inactivity. The muscles burn, the lungs protest, the body complains. If you do not understand what is happening, you might conclude that something is wrong with you, that you are not made for this level of effort. But anyone who has trained for any length of time knows that this temporary pain is a sign that dormant fibers are waking up, that strength is being summoned, that capacity is being expanded. The same principle applies to every area of your life. When you push yourself mentally, emotionally, or spiritually, you will feel a similar burning, confusion, frustration, doubt, and fatigue will rise within you. That is not proof that you are weak. It is proof that you have finally left the comfort zone that kept you small. Endurance begins when you stop interpreting every uncomfortable feeling as a warning to quit and start seeing it as confirmation that you are exactly where you need to be. Resistance, however, is more subtle. Pain is loud. Resistance often comes disguised as reasonable thought. It says, "You have done enough for today." It says, "This is not the right time." It says, "You are tired. You should wait until you feel more motivated." It pretends to protect you, but its real purpose is to preserve the status quo. Notice how resistance always appears when you are about to do something that matters. You rarely feel that same internal war when you are about to waste an hour scrolling. But the moment you sit down to write, to plan, to learn, to train, a chorus of objections arise. That is not an accident. It is a pattern. When you understand that resistance will always show up at the doorway of meaningful action, you stop being surprised by it. You stop treating it as a sign to stop and start treating it as a signal to begin. You realize, if I am feeling this much pull to delay, it must mean this action is important to my future. The art of endurance is learning to move forward precisely when resistance is strongest. Pain and resistance will always challenge your emotions first. You will not always feel like doing the work. You will not always feel inspired, confident, or brave. If your commitment to your vision depends on feeling good, you will never cross the threshold of average. The man who pushes himself until everything is possible is not the man who always feels powerful. He is the man who has trained himself to act correctly, regardless of how he feels. This is not about suppressing emotion, pretending it does not exist. It is about placing emotion in its proper position. Feelings are indicators, not commanders. They can inform you, but they must not rule you. When fatigue whispers that you have done enough, endurance asks, is this true, or is this simply comfort trying to regain control? When fear insists that you are not ready, endurance responds, I may not feel ready, but I will prepare in motion. The more often you choose action over emotion, the stronger this inner muscle becomes. Over time, your feelings begin to fall in line with your decisions, instead of your decisions always bowing to your feelings. In this way, endurance transforms your relationship with yourself. You stop seeing your mind and body as fragile things that must be protected from discomfort and start seeing them as instruments that become sharper under pressure. However, the art of endurance is not mindless stubbornness. It is not grinding for the sake of appearance, ignoring all signals and driving yourself into self-destruction. That is not strength. That is ego masquerading as discipline. True endurance is intelligent. It knows when the pain you feel is the pain of growth and when it is the pain of damage. It learns to distinguish between laziness and genuine exhaustion, between fear that must be confronted and wisdom that warns you to adjust your approach. The man who truly pushes himself does not merely crash into the same wall repeatedly. He studies the wall. He learns from each collision. He adapts his strategy while protecting his commitment. He rests when rest will allow him to return stronger, not when rest is simply an escape from doing hard things. This is why reflection is such an essential companion to endurance. Each evening, if you will pause and review your day, you will begin to see patterns. Where did you push through resistance? What did you learn about your limits? Where did you pull back too soon? What excuse did you allow to win the argument? These honest questions are uncomfortable, but they are the questions that refine your endurance from raw stubbornness into precise strength. There is another dimension of pain and resistance that you must understand if you want to redraw the limits of your life. Not all pain comes from external effort. Some of the deepest pain you will face comes from separation, from leaving behind people, habits, and environments that are no longer aligned with where you are going. When you decide to raise your standards, your old life will not applaud. The friends who preferred the old version of you may see your new discipline as an insult. The people who benefited from your weakness may feel threatened by your strength. You will be tempted to lower your standards to keep those connections intact. That social and emotional pressure is a form of resistance just as real as physical fatigue. Endurance in this area means understanding that you cannot drag everyone with you into the life you are building. Some will walk with you. Some will watch you. Some will resent you. You must decide which matters more, the comfort of acceptance or the call of your potential. When you push yourself until everything is possible, you will occasionally feel the pain of loneliness. You will work in silence while others gather in distraction. You will study while others entertain themselves. You will invest while others spend. You will train while others rest. In those moments, your mind may say, "Is this worth it?" The art of endurance is learning to answer that question from the vision you are building, not from the moment you are in. You remind yourself that every sacrifice has a return, that every lonely hour is a seed planted in the soil of your future, that every time you endure discomfort now, you are sparing your future self from the greater pain of regret. Pain itself can be transformed into power if you are willing to reinterpret it. The same situation that makes one man bitter can make another man better. The same setback that causes one person to quit can become the very story another person uses to inspire generations. What makes the difference? It is not the size of the pain, it is the decision made in the middle of it. Will you see this as evidence that life is unfair? Or will you see it as a test revealing to you exactly what must be developed within you? Will you use this challenge as a justification to shrink? Or will you use it as a reason to expand? Endurance is not passive. It is active cooperation with adversity. It is saying, if this is in my path, then it must become my teacher. I will not deny it. I will not pretend it is easy, but I will demand that it leaves me stronger than it found me. When you adopt this stance, the very things that were meant to keep you small become the raw material for your greatness. Notice how all of this connects with everything else in your journey. Your mental boundaries determine how you interpret pain. Your standards determine what you are willing to endure. Your habits and daily structure determine whether you crumble under resistance or hold steady through it. None of these elements stand alone. They form a chain. When pain comes and you have no clarity of purpose, You will see no reason to continue. When resistance rises and you have no standards, you will negotiate your way back to comfort. When difficulty appears and your days are chaotic, you will lack the strength and order to withstand the pressure. But when you know why you are pushing, when you have raised your standards to match that purpose, when your day is structured in alignment with that identity, pain becomes bearable. Resistance becomes a signal, not a sentence. Endurance becomes possible. Finally, understand that endurance is not merely about surviving hard seasons. It is about becoming a different kind of person because of them. Every time you push through resistance, you are writing a new story about who you are. You are no longer the man who quits when it hurts. You are no longer the man who negotiates with every difficulty. You are becoming the man who can be trusted with greater responsibility, who can be relied upon under pressure, who can be counted on when others fall apart. That is the kind of man for whom everything becomes possible, because he has proven that he will not collapse when possibility demands a high price. As you move into deeper levels of this journey, remember this: pain will visit, resistance will speak, doubt will try to bargain. Let them come. Let them say what they will. Then return to your work. Return to your standards. Return to your structure. Refuse to allow temporary discomfort to dictate permanent decisions. This is the art of endurance: to feel everything and still move forward, to be tested and still remain true, to be pressured and still choose purpose. When you live this way, day after day, the limits that once felt solid begin to crack. The ceilings you once accepted begin to rise. The boundaries others warned you about dissolve under the weight of your persistence. In that place, you will discover that pushing yourself until everything is possible was never just about what you achieved. It was about the unbreakable character you forged in the fire of pain, resistance, and endurance. Vision, imagination, and possibility are not abstract ideas reserved for dreamers. They are the engine room of everything you are trying to build. Without them, discipline becomes dry. Pain becomes meaningless and endurance turns into mere survival. You can force yourself to work for a season. You can push through discomfort for a while. But if you have no compelling vision, no living picture of who you are becoming and what you are creating, eventually your effort will collapse under the weight of boredom and confusion. Vision is not a luxury in this journey. It is oxygen. When we spoke of mental boundaries, we were really speaking about the invisible lines your imagination has drawn around your life. When we spoke of raising standards, we were talking about upgrading the picture of the person you believe yourself to be. When we spoke of discipline and habits, we were outlining how you turn that inner picture into daily structure. Now we go deeper. If you want to push yourself until everything is possible, you must learn how to use vision and imagination as tools, not as toys. You must treat them as instruments of construction, not as temporary escapes from your current reality. Most people misunderstand imagination. They use it to replay old wounds instead of rehearsing new victories. They use it to magnify fears instead of expanding faith. They use it to dwell in fantasies that never touch their behavior. That kind of imagination weakens you. It pulls you away from action. But there is another way to use this gift. You can train your imagination to become the architect of your future, the projector that plays the movie of who you are becoming until your nervous system, your habits, and your choices begin to adjust to match it. Vision is simply imagination given direction, detail, and commitment. It is not just a dream. It is a decision about who you will be and what you will build. When you hold a true vision, you are no longer wandering through life, hoping good things will happen. You are walking with a map engraved into your mind. Every step you take, every sacrifice you make, every boundary you break begins to make sense because you can see where it is leading you. A man without vision cannot endure much pain. Why would he? He has no story to put that pain inside. He interprets every difficulty as pointless suffering, so he runs from it, complains about it, resents it. But a man with vision can endure far more than he ever believed possible, because his pain is not random. It is part of the cost of something he has already seen in his mind and chosen in his heart. Vision turns struggle into investment. Imagination, when disciplined, becomes the rehearsal ground for possibility. Before you ever achieve something in the outer world, you must first allow yourself to achieve it in the inner world. You must become familiar with the feeling of that result, not just the image of the car, the house, the bank account, but the internal state of the man who created them. How does he think when he wakes up? How does he walk into a room? How does he handle conflict, opportunity, temptation, pressure? Your imagination must not simply fixate on outcomes. It must learn to dwell on identity. The world will tell you to visualize having things. This journey asks you to visualize becoming someone. There is a difference. Having is a snapshot. Becoming is a process. Having can tempt you to fantasize. Becoming forces you to act. When you truly see yourself as a disciplined, powerful, focused individual, your daily choices either confirm that vision or contradict it. Your imagination begins to accuse you when you live beneath the standard you have already rehearsed internally. That is how possibility expands. Not by wishing, but by repeatedly exposing your mind to a higher version of yourself until living small becomes intolerable. To do this well, you must move beyond vague ideas. Saying, "I want a better life" is not a vision. Saying, "I want success" is not a vision. Those words are too foggy to direct your behavior. A real vision can be described, felt and measured. It answers questions. How do you spend your mornings? Who do you serve with your work? What problems do you solve? What level of excellence do you demand from yourself? What kind of physical energy do you maintain? What does your financial life look like? How do you show up for the people you love? When you push yourself until everything is possible, you do not leave these questions unanswered. You sit with them. You write. You think. You edit. You clarify. You allow yourself to imagine without the chains of your past. And then you carve that imagination into a clear statement of who you are becoming. You might say, "I am building a life where my mind is sharp. My body is strong, and my work creates real value. I see myself waking early with purpose, training my body, feeding my mind, working on a mission that demands my best and rewards others. I see myself acting with integrity under pressure, staying calm in uncertainty, consistent in effort and generous in victory." The more specific and honest this vision becomes, the more power it carries. With a clear vision, your imagination becomes a daily practice, not a random daydream. Each day, even for a few minutes, you close your eyes and step into that future. You feel the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. You feel the steady confidence in your chest. You see the environment you have built, the order and power in your schedule, the excellence in your work. You are not escaping your current life. You are rehearsing the next one. Then you open your eyes and ask a simple but demanding question. What can I do today that is consistent with that man? What decision? What habit? What conversation? What standard can I align right now with the picture I just saw? Once you begin to live this way, vision stops being a poster on your wall or a sentence in a notebook. It becomes a measurement. It becomes a mirror. You look at your behavior and ask, does this belong to the person I intend to be, or does it belong to the person I am leaving behind? This is how imagination expands possibility. Each time you act in alignment with the vision you have rehearsed, you send a message to your subconscious mind. You say, "This is who we are now." At first, your old identity will object. It will call you an imposter. It will say, "Who do you think you are to live like this?" But if you continue, if you repeat the new pattern long enough, the objection quiets. The old self begins to yield. The new self begins to take root. The boundary of what you believe you can do moves. The ceiling you thought was fixed becomes a floor you stand on. In this way, vision is not just inspiration. It is a weapon. Yet, there is a danger here. Some people fall in love with vision and forget that it must be married to action. They build castles in their minds, but never pick up a brick in reality. They talk of what they will become while their habits betray what they are. This leads to self-hatred, because deep down they know they are lying to themselves. The purpose of vision is not to make you feel good. It is to create a standard that you then have the privilege of living up to. When properly used, vision does not rescue you from responsibility. It calls you to higher responsibility. It does not give you permission to wait. It commands you to begin. This is why vision must always be linked with the parts of your life we have already explored. Your standards, your structure, your endurance. You imagine, then you design your day to reflect that imagination. You imagine, then you raise your standards to match that picture. You imagine, then you prepare to endure the pain of becoming that person. Without this integration, vision decays into fantasy. With this integration, vision becomes prophecy, fulfilled by discipline. Let us look at how vision and imagination directly influence the expansion of possibility. For most of your life, you have likely accepted a narrow set of options. You may have believed that with your background, you could only earn a certain amount of money, live in a certain kind of place, work a certain kind of job, maintain a certain level of health. These ceilings did not come from nature. They came from the stories you were told, and then repeated to yourself. When you sit alone with your imagination and dare to question those stories, something begins to shift. You ask, who told me this was the limit? Whose voice am I obeying when I decide what is realistic? You realize that so much of what you call reality is simply a collection of agreements you made with the beliefs of others. In that moment, imagination becomes an act of rebellion. You are no longer willing to live by borrowed limits. You begin to picture outcomes that no one around you has modeled. You see yourself breaking patterns that have held your family, your neighborhood, or your culture for generations. You imagine a level of discipline, contribution, impact, and prosperity that perhaps no one in your direct circle has ever embodied. At first, this feels almost disrespectful. How dare I dream beyond what I have seen? But if you remain faithful to this process, it ceases to feel arrogant and begins to feel aligned. You realize that shrinking your vision to fit the expectations of others does not honor them. It only keeps you and them trapped in the same small story. Expanding your vision, pushing yourself until everything is possible, creates a new reference point, not only for you, but for everyone who watches you rise. Imagination also allows you to rehearse adversity before it arrives. You do not only see the highlight reel of your future, you see the obstacles, the long nights, the criticism, the failures, and the doubts. In your mind, you walk through them. You see yourself holding your standards under pressure. You watch yourself responding with composure when things go wrong. You picture yourself getting back up after each fall, wiser and more determined. This kind of vision trains your nervous system. When real adversity comes, it does not feel like a surprise attack. It feels like a scene you have already rehearsed. You recognize it and step into the role you have imagined. This is another way imagination expands possibility. It reduces the shock of difficulty, allowing you to stay composed and creative when others panic and retreat. Vision must also reach beyond your personal success. If the only picture you hold is of your own comfort, your own status, your own recognition, your imagination will eventually run out of fuel. There are only so many times you can picture yourself with more things before it begins to feel empty. The deepest, most powerful vision always includes contribution. Who are you becoming for the sake of others? Who is lifted because you chose to push your limits? Whose path is made clearer because you refuse to settle for average? When your imagination includes the faces, stories, and futures of those you will impact, your ability to endure expands dramatically. You are no longer pushing solely for yourself. You are pushing for the people who will someday say, because he went further. I believed I could too. That is a vision powerful enough to carry you through years of quiet, invisible work. All of this is deeply connected to the idea of possibility. Possibility is not a fixed menu that life hands you. It is a field that expands or contracts based on the clarity and courage of your vision. When you do not use your imagination, possibility shrinks to what you can see in front of you. You live by reaction instead of creation. When you begin to envision, to question, to design, that field begins to stretch. Opportunities that were always there but once invisible start to come into focus. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because your mind finally tuned itself to notice them. You meet someone and realize they carry a piece of the puzzle you have been imagining. You read a sentence that answers a problem you have been holding in your mind. You see a path in your industry that others overlook because their vision is too small to recognize its value. This is not magic. It is alignment. Vision prepares you to recognize and receive what possibility has been offering all along. As you push yourself, remember this. You are not just forcing your body to work harder. You are training your mind to see farther. You are not only stretching your schedule, you are stretching the frame of what you consider achievable. Every time you courageously imagine a higher version of yourself and then act in alignment with that vision, you are expanding the universe of what is possible in your life. You are sending a signal that says, I am willing to outgrow who I have been. I am willing to accept a future different from my past. I am willing to be responsible for more, to endure more, to contribute more. Life responds to that signal, not instantly, not always in the way you expect, but inevitably. Vision, imagination, and possibility are not separate chapters of your journey. They are one continuous movement. You see, you feel, you decide, you act, you endure, you adjust, and then you see more. Each cycle moves you further from the man who once asked, "Is this possible for me?" and closer to the man who calmly declares, "If I am willing to pay the price, I can make this real." That is the transformation this part of the journey invites you into. To stop borrowing your sense of possibility from the opinions of others and to start building it from the vision you have crafted, the imagination you have disciplined, and the future you have decided to pursue without apology. Persistence, legacy, and becoming the person for whom anything is possible are not three separate ideas. They are three faces of the same transformation. Persistence is how you move. Legacy is what remains after you are gone. Becoming that kind of person is the inner work that makes both possible. Up to this point, we have rebuilt your boundaries, raised your standards, structured your days, trained you to endure pain, and expanded your vision. Now we must ask the final and most serious question. Who do you become when the initial fire fades? When the applause goes silent? When results are slow? When you are no longer chasing a feeling but carrying a responsibility? Persistence is not just doing something for a long time. Persistence is the decision to remain aligned with your vision long after the emotion that started you has disappeared. It is the quiet, stubborn refusal to negotiate with your old self. It is the inner voice that says, I will keep going because the man I am becoming has no interest in returning to who I was. Many begin the journey of pushing their limits with intensity. They feel inspired. They feel motivated. They feel unstoppable. Then the first storm comes. A plan fails. A trusted person disappoints them. Money runs tight. Fatigue sets in. Old habits whisper for comfort. Most people interpret these moments as signs that they are on the wrong path. They retreat and call it wisdom. The persistent man sees it differently. He understands that any path that leads to a higher level of life will demand a higher level of him. He expects resistance. He expects delay. He expects seasons where he is working, planting, pushing, and yet nothing visible seems to change. And instead of collapsing into self-pity, he interprets that season as proof that he is in training for something larger than his current results. That is persistence, not blind stubbornness, but intelligent endurance. He adjusts methods, but never abandons the mission. He reviews his strategy, but never questions his decision to rise. To become the person for whom anything is possible, you must reframe how you see time. The average mind thinks in days, weeks, and flashes of effort. The persistent mind thinks in years, decades, and layers of compound growth. When you act from a shallow time frame, every setback feels catastrophic. One bad week ruins your belief. One difficult month makes you question everything. But when you extend your horizon, when you accept that you are building a life, a character, and a legacy over years, you begin to treat setbacks as chapters, not conclusions. You stop asking, "Did today prove that I am successful?" and start asking, "Did today prove that I am the kind of person who keeps moving towards success regardless of what happened?" That shift is the birth of unshakable persistence. It is easy to push yourself when results are immediate. It is easy to push yourself when others are watching. It is easy to push yourself when you are collecting short-term rewards, compliments, and visible progress. The real question is, who are you when nothing seems to be happening, when progress is slow and lonely, when no one is clapping, when the work feels repetitive and unseen? That is where the person for whom anything is possible is formed. Greatness is not forged in highlights. It is forged in the anonymous hours where you could walk away and no one would blame you. But you refuse because you have decided that quitting is simply not part of your identity anymore. Legacy enters when your reason for persisting outgrows your personal comfort. As long as you are only pushing for what you can get, your endurance will always be limited. The day will come when you decide that you are satisfied enough, that you have more than those around you, that easing off would not destroy your life. If your definition of success stops at you, you will slow down there. But when you begin to see your life as a message, when you understand that you are writing a story with your days, a story your children, your family, your community, and even strangers will read long after you are gone, your relationship with persistence changes. You are no longer just building a career, a bank account, or a physique. You are building evidence. Evidence that a human being can rise above his limitations. That discipline can defeat circumstance. That vision can rewrite a life. That pain can be turned into power. That possibility is not reserved for the few. Legacy is the imprint of how you lived, stamped onto the minds and hearts of others. Becoming the person for whom anything is possible means living with an awareness that your choices echo. The way you handle failure teaches others how to handle theirs. The way you respond to pressure gives them a model. The way you speak about your struggles, about your goals, about your responsibilities, sets a standard that someone else will either rise to or sink beneath. When you truly grasp this, you will stop asking, "Can I get away with quitting?" and start asking, "What does my persistence give permission for others to do?" This is where your drive deepens. You are now pushing not only for the life you desire, but for the lives that your example will awaken. The man who understands legacy becomes dangerous to limitation. He will work through seasons that would break another, because he knows his endurance is building a path for more than himself. To reach this level, you must clean your relationship with failure. If every time you fall short, you treat it as evidence that you are not good enough, you will never persist long enough to see what you truly can become. Failure is not proof of your weakness. Failure is feedback on your strategy, your preparation, your timing, and your focus. Persistence is the decision to extract every lesson failure offers without allowing it to poison your identity. When something does not work, you ask, "What can I refine? What can I study? Whom can I learn from? How can I return stronger next time?" This mindset turns defeat into raw material. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a craftsman shaping a life out of whatever reality hands you. The person for whom anything is possible is not the one who never falls. He is the one who cannot be convinced to stay down. You must also confront the temptation to live a double life. Many people speak words of persistence, discipline, and possibility. Yet their private behavior tells another story. Out in public, they are committed, focused, unstoppable. In private, they negotiate with every excuse, abandon their standards at the first sign of discomfort, and quietly accept mediocrity in the hidden corners of their day. This split will destroy your power. The foundation of becoming that kind of person is internal integrity. You must reach a point where your own opinion of yourself matters more than the opinions of others. When you say you will do something, you must care more about keeping that promise for your own sake than you do about being seen as someone who keeps promises. Persistence becomes permanent when you are no longer performing for an audience, but honoring an agreement with your own soul. Each time you follow through on a commitment that no one else knows about, you add another brick to the internal structure of your character. Over time, you begin to trust yourself. That trust is the true source of confidence. It is not loud or boastful. It is quiet and solid. You know that whatever you decide to pursue, you will stay with it long enough to see what is possible, because you have already proven it to yourself in 100 small, secret battles. Persistence is not always dramatic. Yes, there are moments when you must dig deep, when you must work through exhaustion, when you must rise after a heavy blow. But more often, persistence looks like doing the right thing again and again until it stops feeling heroic and starts feeling normal. It is the writer who sits down every day, whether inspired or not, and writes a page. It is the entrepreneur who reviews the numbers every week, adjusts strategies, and keeps calling, presenting, refining. Even when the market is slow, it is the parent who chooses patience one more time, who listens one more minute, who guides and corrects even when they could escape into distractions. It is the individual who keeps their morning ritual sacred, who guards their mind, who moves their body, who revisits their vision day after day. These actions may not impress anyone in the moment, but over years they accumulate into a life that looks impossible from the outside. People will say, "He is lucky. She has a gift. They must have had help." They will not see the weight of persistence that produced what they admire. But you will know, and that knowledge will keep you humble and hungry. Legacy is not only about what you leave after you die. It is also about the atmosphere you create while you are alive. When you persist in your growth, you alter the conversations around you. You normalize effort. You make discipline expected instead of unusual. You make self-pity uncomfortable and personal responsibility attractive. The people closest to you begin to either rise with you or drift away. Your very presence becomes a form of pressure, not because you are commanding them, but because your life makes excuses impossible to believe in with the same comfort as before. This is how one persistent person can shift a family, a circle of friends, a workplace, and eventually a community. The person for whom anything is possible understands that his life is a channel, not a container. What he builds, he shares. What he learns, he teaches. What he overcomes, he uses to pull others forward. This does not mean he sacrifices his dreams to please others. It means he allows the expansion of his life to widen the path for those behind him. He becomes proof that possibility is meant to be multiplied, not hoarded. To truly become that person, you must commit to lifelong growth. There is no point at which you simply arrive and retire from effort. There are new levels of awareness, new capacities, new responsibilities, and new arenas of service waiting at every stage of your journey. The man who stops learning, stops stretching, and stops questioning his own assumptions begins to shrink. Even if his external success remains for a time, persistence is not just about staying with one goal. It is about staying loyal to the process of evolving. It is about repeatedly saying yes to the discomfort of growth. It is about refusing to let the comfort of what you have already achieved seduce you into betraying the potential of what you could still become. Remember also that persistence is not meant to strip your life of joy. The man who pushes himself until everything is possible does not live in constant tension, grim, and joyless. He learns to find satisfaction in the process itself. He learns to see beauty in the routine, in the sweat, in the quiet victories no one sees. He learns to celebrate progress, not perfection. He gives himself room to rest, to recover, to laugh, to love, to enjoy what he has created while still moving toward what he has not yet created. This balance is not weakness. It is wisdom. It allows his persistence to last not for months, but for decades. Finally, understand this. Becoming the person for whom anything is possible is not about perfection. It is about direction. It is about deciding, again and again, that you will move toward your highest vision of yourself. No matter how many times you stumble, no matter how long it takes, no matter how loud the doubts inside and outside may become, it is about making an agreement with yourself that you will not abandon your potential, that you will not betray your own soul by settling for a life that is smaller than the one you are capable of building. Persistence is the daily honoring of that agreement. Legacy is the trail of impact that agreement leaves behind. The man you become in this process is the real prize. The money, the recognition, the achievements are reflections, not the core. The core is that you have proven to yourself that you can decide who you will be and then build that person. One disciplined, persistent day at a time. When you reach that understanding, you no longer ask if everything is possible. You know that possibility expands to meet the standard of the person you are willing to become. And from that place, you rise each day with a quiet determination and a clear mind, ready to push, ready to learn, ready to endure, and ready to write a legacy that says to anyone who watches, this is what becomes available when a human being refuses to stop. My friend, if this message has stirred something powerful in you, do not let this moment fade. Stay connected, stay learning, stay rising. Subscribe to this channel so you never walk this journey alone. Every week, I bring you teachings crafted to strengthen your mind, sharpen your purpose, and pull you closer to the life you were meant to build. If you are serious about rewriting your limits and becoming the person for whom everything becomes possible, subscribe now and continue this path with us. Your future will thank you.